going to start giving everyone access to record.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We'll begin in a few minutes. If you can, please remain muted. And our staff are going to give folks permission to record through Zoom, and we'll get started in just a few minutes.
Lockie, would you admit a few other folks to the room while I add people to allow them to record? My goodness, I can't speak.
Just admitted a couple more folks. We're just going to let a few more people trickle in before we begin. And for those who are just joining us, I'd like to ask for you to remain muted until the floor is open for questions. And we will be getting started in a few minutes.
Okay, I believe I gave everyone access to record, but if I haven't gotten to you, just send me a message and I will add you.
Thanks for the help, Angelita. All right, so it looks like we've got one last person coming in.
Lucky, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Gillian. I don't think I have a permission to record right now, although I'm kind of technologically challenged on Zoom.
Okay.
I'm doing it right now for the other half of the folks in here.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Who was the person who just spoke who said they couldn't record?
That was me, Gillian, but I think actually I'm recording now, so I think it's okay.
Perfect.
All right. Great. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. All right. So welcome, everyone. I'm Lockie Au. I am the Commissioner's Communications Strategist. And just wanted to give some process for everyone so that we know how this is going to go before I turn it over to the Commissioner. So the Commissioner in a little bit will give some opening remarks. And the purpose of this session is really to give media the chance to ask the Commissioner questions. We know there's a number of questions that you all have, and given her very, very packed schedule, we wanted to make the time for you all to be able to have her answer some questions that we're sure are coming up through the daily events. And so just a little bit about how we're going to go through this. The Commissioner is going to give opening remarks, and we'd like to ask for folks to hold questions until the floor is open after the Commissioner gives her opening remarks. We don't have a raise hand function, so what I'd like to ask folks to do is that once the Commissioner is done giving her remarks, to use the chat box and just type in Q or question, and I will just go down the list as I see questions come in. And then I will ask you to unmute yourself. So I'm asking everyone to make sure you're all muted at the moment. I'll unmute each person, and when I unmute you, if you could please just state your name or repeat your name and also which media affiliation you're with. And we'll just keep going down the list that way. And I'd like to try to make sure that every member of the media gets one question before we do a second round of questions. So, if you have a clarifying question regarding what the commissioner said, totally great. Feel free to ask that. But if you have a second question, I'd ask you to just wait a beat and let someone else ask their first question first, and then we'll make sure we can try to get as many questions as we can. So with that, just want to make sure to remind everyone to mute themselves. And with that, I will turn it over to the commissioner.
Thank you, Lockie, and thank you all for joining us in this press event today. As you can imagine, if I had to do each of you individually, that would be all I did every day, all day. So I want to recognize that for many of you, the last month has been extremely trying. And I want to appreciate the fact that even in the midst of being abused by police forces, that you continue to show up and you continue to try to provide really good information to the public. And I know for me personally, I have learned some things that I would never have known had it not been for media reports. Because the information that I get sometimes inside the bubble in City Hall is filtered. So I want to thank you very much for that. One thing pops out right away for me when I say that is Everton Bailey's reporting on the exaggerated number of the damage that was done downtown by protesters. Without that reporting, the assumption, and even though people are still saying it, the assumption would have been that protesters are causing this loss of economic opportunity, when in fact it's actually COVID-19 and the pandemic. I always try to be very accessible and very forthright, and sometimes I screw up. And yesterday was one of those days that it was very emotional, and I made some remarks that were out of the context that I would have liked to have put it in. And I put out a public apology about that, and I'm sure that there will still be some additional questions about that, and I'm fine with it. I want to appreciate you daily for the 2 resolutions that you brought forth yesterday, because it is absolutely critical that we make sure that both Portland Police Bureau and the feds are not targeting media and observers for enhanced police actions. Let's see, what else did I want to say in the beginning? I just want to talk about, we are now in the midst of our 4th crisis in the last 6 months. We started with the COVID-19 pandemic that, as you know, is worldwide. Then immediately thereafter was the economic cliff that we are continuing to go over. And third was the racial justice demands that are being heard all over the United States, as well as in 16 countries. And last but not least, being targeted by 45 for unaccountable secret police force that every night brutalizes our community. So being in the midst of 4 crises simultaneously does make emotions run high. All of us are exhausted, but all of us are committed to making sure that, I am committed to making sure that I provide the best service I can for the people of Portland. And so I am yours. Let's have this conversation. Who has the first question? Oh, shy media? Tell me it's not so.
All right. So folks, if you have a question, great. Looks like we've got a couple coming in.
All right.
All right. So the first one is Jeff Kirsch. Jeff, if you want to unmute yourself and let us know where you're, what media affiliation you got, and ask away.
Actually, I think that's me. It's Kelly Ozer from K2, but it is under Jeff's name. My apologies. I forgot to change it. So
That's all good.
This is Kelly Ozer. I'm from K2 News. Last night, Mayor Ted Wheeler went down to the protests, and while he was down there, protesters kept chanting that they wanted the rest of the commission down there. And often we hear that you guys as a commission felt that things were de-escalating before the feds got here. Why do you believe that to be true when even before the feds got here, night after night, we were seeing unrest and we continue to? How do we get the streets of Portland back?
So prior to the feds coming in a week ago Saturday, there was public announcements, I know, by the group Rose City Justice, who had been bringing thousands of people downtown every night to protest, had announced that they were no longer going to be doing daily protests, which meant that there were thousands of people who weren't going to show up at Revolution Hall in preparation for marches across the bridges to downtown. And so what we started to see was a separation and a lot less people showing up downtown. As you know, we had over 10,000 plus people showing up at some points early on in the protest downtown. And it was down to a few hundred people. In fact, even the police were saying, when they were having 400 to 500 people showing up at the Justice Center, it was now down to a couple of hundred people. Because I am the Commissioner of Fire, I have listened to the radio every night about what's going on. So the difference between what was going on downtown when the protests first started, the first night when the police and everyone else was caught off guard, as compared to what's happening now, it absolutely was de-escalating. What is making more people come to the street every night now is the brutalization that's happening to regular community members at the hands of Portland police and these federal agents. And when they attacked the moms, there was only a couple of hundred of them the first night. And after that, there became a couple of thousand. I organized last Friday night, over 2,000 people, all peaceful. And 10 minutes after I left, they were gassed. And there were people with mobility devices. There were children. It was very multiracial. I asked the crowd of 2,000 plus to please not chant F the police, to please not talk about abolition or cutting 50 million. Can we focus tonight, last Friday, a week ago Friday, can we focus on peace and the Constitution? And they said yes. Have you ever been able to get 2,000 people to agree to something at one time, right? So I know that the reason why we have thousands of people on the street tonight is because Portlanders are not going to sit back when they see an injustice happening. They're going to come and they're going to stand on the line, and that's why they're joining. That's why we have more people now that the feds are here, and they're indiscriminately abusing people.
But Commissioner, just as a follow-up to my question, while you are a Commissioner of Fire, you're also a Commissioner of the city. How do we get the streets back?
Well, first we have to get the federal goon squad out of here. And then if I were a police commissioner, I would actually not have the police responding in riot gear at a protest, because all that does is actually increase tensions. It doesn't reduce tensions.
All right. Thanks, Kelly. Next question is from Sarah Hurwitz.
Hey, Commissioner, thank you so much for taking some time and giving us an opportunity to ask some questions.
You're welcome.
I wanted to ask you about yesterday as well. And I wanted to pull out a quote that you said yesterday.
All right.
Know that I do not believe that there are any protesters in Portland that are starting fires and that are creating chaos. I absolutely believe that it is police action and that they are sending saboteurs and provocateurs into peaceful crowds so that they can justify their inhumane treatment of people who are standing up for their rights. And then, you did follow up later in the evening with an apology. Do you feel what you said about protesters and them not starting any fires and creating chaos? Is that accurate?
Well, unfortunately, I didn't say the whole statement that I should have said yesterday. Sometimes that's what happens when you take shortcuts in a conversation. Have protesters set fires? Yes. But what I know about protesters setting fires is that other protesters have put them out. So there has been, the police or fire and rescue could not have gone in and put those fires out. Now, I'm not talking about the first night when the Justice Center actually was, the glass was broken and a fire was started inside. But I also know that fire suppression devices had been left in that location at the Justice Center just for that reason, right? If there was a fire in there, if it was hard to get a fire truck in, they had some equipment at their disposal. So back to my statement. I am a child of the civil rights movement, and I have been evaluating Portland police reports and audits and activities for 30 years. And what I know is that in movements, whether it was the war movement, whether it was the civil rights movement, that the police have sent in undercover people to create the violence that leads to over-policing. What I know is that in Portland, when you look at the history of who gets stopped, who gets prosecuted, the Gang Enforcement Unit was a great example. For 10 years before I was on the city council, I asked regularly, how is it possible that 56% of the stops of the gang unit are of African Americans in a city with a 6% population? And no elected leader ever looked into that in detail. No elected leader ever said, she must be right because there's only 6% Black people. It wasn't until I got in office that the police bureau did a bait and switch and went from a gang enforcement unit to all of a sudden a gun violence reduction team. And it was on purpose. It was on purpose so that they did not have to give me data that I would be entitled to as a city council member. Do I think that Gerald Turner personally set a fire? No, I don't. But again, I was in the height of my emotions yesterday. But do I think that they have the potential to do things that, let me just say, not even potential. Gerald Turner continues to tell media outlets that there was over $25 million damage done by protesters. And some of you have actually called him out on it. He hasn't changed his rhetoric at all, right? So do I think police are exacerbating, both federal police and Portland police? Yes, they are exacerbating they're exacerbating the tension. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean,
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting at the root of, we have video, from crews that have been down on the streets of Portland of protesters, lighting buildings on fire, throwing fireworks. So yeah, I just wanted to get that and hear from you.
Yeah.
Whether you firmly believed that it was just police action, but I believe you answered it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. Looks like the next question is from Maggie Vespa.
Hi, Commissioner. I also want to ask you, about your statements yesterday. You said, in your statement following the Marie Claire interview, once that was released, that your emotions got the most of you. 50 plus days in, I think it's safe to say that was indeed the most sort of hyperbolic thing that we've heard you or read you
Yes.
saying.
Yes.
I'm sure you can expand upon why you think now, like what, if anything, happened that kind of caused your emotions, as you say, to get the best of you? And then
Yes.
more than that, moving forward, have you
Mhm.
spoken to Chief? Have you spoken to Daryl Turner? How do you move forward from that? Has that process started?
I appreciate you asking that question. Yes, that process has started. I reached out to Chief Lavelle earlier today and asked him to call me back. I've known Daryl Turner for a long time. I'm going to have to sleep on whether or not I think he deserves a phone call, honestly, because, again, the hyperbole that I've seen come from him mine wasn't even close to his. I'm sure that the right thing to do would be to call him, and I will. I'm just not ready to do it now, and I'll probably take the weekend and give him a call on Monday, assuming that things go well this weekend. Let me just say that as the first African-American woman on the city council, as someone who has had to just kind of put my own personal feeling aside because I have a job to do, there's been a lot coming at me, right, nonstop. And I can say when I'm wrong, right? There's nothing wrong with being wrong. I knew yesterday, the longer the day went, the more I could feel the tension coming up. And it started Saturday, knowing that people who work for me, that I love, could have been killed because of police action downtown that happened 10 minutes after I left. That was not by accident. And so carrying that, in addition to everything else, is what led to that. But I'm an adult, and when I'm wrong, I will say I'm wrong. And when an apology is needed, I will give one.
Bernie Foster.
Hey, Bernie.
Thanks.
How you doing?
I'm doing well, Bernie. How about you? I think Lockie thinks you're out of this, but I love you, and I'm going to go ahead and let you ask your question, Bernie.
I appreciate that. You mentioned that you're to be the first African-American female. You came out about a couple of days ago, and as a sitting commissioner, I don't recall anyone ever, as a sitting commissioner, come out against a candidate that's running and say that you're not supporting them. Most of the time, either they stay out of it or they don't get involved.
Right.
So what was your, don't you think you're setting precedent by invoking your feelings on who should be on the council? Isn't that up to the voters?
Well, it is up to the voters, but the voters have a right to know how I think, because the difference between being on a city council and being a state legislator, in the legislature, I needed 16 votes in the Senate and 31 votes in the House. On the city council, with 5 people, I need 3 votes to do anything. And so it is important for me to find people who I believe will work well with the city council. For the August special election, it was necessary for me to be clear about having someone who works in cooperation with other people, who has a history of doing that, against a candidate that has a history of not doing that. And so that wasn't even a hard choice. The harder choice was in the mayor's race and other races. But I think the voters want to know, and I think when politicians say, I'm going to set it out because I have to work with whoever shows up, that's a good answer. But it also doesn't help voters decide who's going to be a good fix and mix with the folks who are already on the city council.
Just a follow-up question on that as well. You indicated that you're supporting the mayor, and you asked for that position, and maybe you've been asked this before today. So what would you do different if you had the police chief of police bureau? If you had the police bureau, what would you do differently than what the mayor is not doing?
Well, if I had the police bureau, I would immediately, and I did tell the mayor this, by the way, last Saturday when we spoke. If I had the police bureau, I'd give an immediate order to say that they would no longer show up at protests, that they would answer 911 calls.
Okay.
And they would not show up at protests and with full protective gear, riot gear, right? Because what we know is that when police show up in riot gear, it actually enhances tension and it doesn't de-escalate tension. You may remember early in the protests when the police were very relaxed, they didn't have riot gear on, even though they were behind a fence, they were actually smiling and conversing with people. That's what I want to see Portland police officers do. I don't want to see them coming out initially ready for a fight. And that's exactly what it looks like when they show up in riot gear. So that would be the first thing I would do. The second thing I would do is actually fundamentally work with them to ensure that they are not collaborating at all with any federal forces whatsoever. Again, because of media reports, I learned that that there had been a Homeland Security individual embedded in the Portland Police Command Center since the beginning of the protests. That should have never happened, and it would not happen if I was a police commissioner. Over the next several months, I would actually engage both police and community and re-envisioning what community safety looks like. Because what I know is that what the current system we have does not work. It doesn't work for police, and it certainly doesn't work for community. And so I have a lot of ideas about how I would change how policing would happen if I had the police bureau. And if I don't have the police bureau, I'm still going to work on making those changes.
The last question, is there any thoughts, have you considered any thoughts on that police union contract that's coming up in January?
Oh, of course. I mean, you may know that prior to me arriving at City Hall, the police union contract was not something that was discussed by the entire City Council. It was not something that was public. It was not something that allowed for real dialogue and conversation. In my time at City Hall, we have hired an outside attorney to negotiate the Portland Police Bureau contract, because in my 30 years of following police contracts, what I know is the city is ineffective in negotiating against the police union. So we hired an outside attorney, and that outside attorney will be the lead negotiator this year. In addition, my chief of staff is part of the negotiation team, and for the first time, every office at City Hall voted to bring in an outside attorney and to have this process be open. That would not have happened without my years of actually understanding how this contract worked. In fact, under Sam Adams as mayor was the first one that told me that the contracts could be had in public. No other police commissioners ever mentioned that, right? So I came in with that knowledge and came in with that fight to make sure that when we do this contract, we're going to do it out in the open, and we're going to do it with an attorney that I think will represent the city's best interests.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Bernie. All right, the next question's from Nick Budnick.
Hi there. Thank you very much. Hi, Commissioner.
Hi, Nick.
Hey there. I was wondering, 2 days ago, you made it clear that you still intended to make the case to become police commissioner despite the mayor saying, no, thanks.
Right.
And then, of course, yesterday happened, and then last night he, as you saw, I'm sure he said, no, I have no plans to do that. Do you still intend to continue making that case, and how would you communicate your case in light of the comments about suspicions about police actually setting the fires? Now you want to become their boss. What do you say about your ability to lead that department? What's the message you would send to the public, I guess?
Well, I guess let me go to that one first. I guess what I would say is I have more experience with Portland Police than all my city council colleagues combined. I was part of the group that brought the Department of Justice to town to investigate police killings of Black and brown people. I was part of the team that met with the DOJ and the police on a regular basis. I have been one of the people, well, I've read every audit that has ever come out around Portland Police. I have read all their stop data until they stopped making it public, and you can't find it on their website now, but I suspect it must still be there somewhere. I have a long history of analyzing whether or not Portland Police Bureau is doing what they say they are doing. Great example, it was back in, just before the DOJ came to town, Portland Police said they were no longer recording gang members. They're no identifying identifying people as gang members. And then it took an audit from the auditor to find out, well, actually, that really wasn't true. They were continuing to identify people as gang members. They just weren't telling those people that they were being identified as gang members. And so what I know about Portland Police after 30 years of actually really engaging them at a really deep level is that they present information in ways that are supposed to enhance their perception of who the criminals are, where the crime is happening, and how much money they need to solve it. Every time Portland Police Bureau does not get the budget they want, they take a vote of no confidence in the city council. And so my other colleagues may have been surprised, but I've seen them use that tactic over and over and over again. I think because the public dialogue is now not assuming that anything that the police say is true. For example, going back to the 25 million plus in damages. And so I want to put it back on you, Nick. Do you print Portland Police press releases as if they're fact? Because I know there are many media outlets that if the police say it, they just either read it or they print it. And I have found that those press releases aren't always accurate, but they are meant to sell an opinion about what's taking place. What else? As you may know, I had 3 terms on a Judiciary Committee. Policing was one of the big issues on that. I co-chaired it for 3 terms. I have been involved in just about every work group around police reform. Bear Katz put me on the committee to reimagine when there was a oversight board that everybody quit at the same time. She put me on that committee. The committee asked for, the majority of the committee wanted a truly independent police oversight. We didn't get that. We ended up with what we have now with IPR. So I am the one with the history of knowing like what police say and then actually what the data really shows. So there's no one with more grounding in how police communicate, what they say, and quite frankly what they do. I can't imagine anyone else being better. Now it's totally up to the mayor to decide whether or not he wants to give me the bureau. Clearly, I have a lot of community support for him to do that. And, my statement yesterday should not undo 30 years of work in this community around trying to reform the police. That was a statement that I regret making, but, and the 4 crises we've been in, I have to say, what my friends would say, diarrhea of the mouth, would not actually negate all the work that's been done and continues to be done.
Thank you. Are you actually discussing this with the mayor still, or is it more of you're making your case to the public now?
Well, the mayor and I have not talked since I made that ask. I've reached out to him. He was mad. He wouldn't talk to me. I'm going to reach out to him again this weekend and see if he and I can have a one-on-one. I think the bottom line is whether I have the police bureau or not, I'm going to continue to do the work that I need to do to reform Portland Police, because it does need to be reformed, and we do need to change how policing happens in the city of Portland. So I don't need the police bureau in my portfolio to do it, but I think it would make a lot of sense since I have all the other first responder bureaus. And because all the first responder bureaus work together anyway, it's just a logical transition that should take place.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Nick. Next question is from Nigel. Nigel, you there?
Nigel, you're on mute.
Sorry about that.
No worry.
You hear me now?
Yep.
Good afternoon. Thanks for taking the time.
You're welcome.
Two questions. The first question is, in early June, the police changed their policy on name tags, allowing officers to cover up their names, making it very difficult for members of the public to file complaints about potential misconduct. Do you support that policy? And if not, what would you have officers do?
I had the conversation with Chief Lavelle about that. And now talk about circular thinking. So I said to Chief Lavelle in my open letter to him and Mayor Wheeler that they should have their ID numbers in bright big letters on the back of their jacket. No community members should have to get into a police officer's personal space to identify who they are. And then Maxine Bernstein did a report that said that if you have the number, Portland Police will not give you the name of the officer. And so in one of my meetings with Chief Lavelle, I asked him, I said, if I have been abused by a police officer and I want to file a complaint and I have his ID number, his badge number, are you telling me that I cannot get the name? And he said, no, we won't give out the name. In fact, what the quote in the paper was, you have to have the police officer's name in order for us to give you the name. I said to the chief, well, Chief, this doesn't make sense to me. As a community member, I have the right to know the name of the public servant who has abused me if I want to make a complaint. And what he said to me was, well, IPR would know who it is. I said, but that's not the point. And I pushed back and pushed back. And finally, I just said, we cannot have rules for police that are different than we have rules for community members. I said to him, we chose to be public servants. And when you choose to be public servants, it comes with all the good and all the bad. But he could not understand any scenario where the public should be able to know the name of a police officer that is being accused of misconduct. But he did make an exception to say, oh, well, but if you're in another part of town and it's not around downtown and around the protest, then it's probably fine for you to be able to know their name. I said, you can't have mixed rules. You can't have different rules for the for the public and the police. And so there's truly a disconnect, which is why I think the whole culture, it's not individuals, it is the entire culture of Portland Police Bureau that is fundamentally unmanageable and must change.
Thank you, Commissioner. If I could just follow up,
please.
You had earlier endorsed Mayor Wheeler for his reelection. Now that you and he are not currently speaking, are you reconsidering that endorsement, or do you still endorse his reelection?
Well, I'm just working on the August 11th special election right now, right? Full court press on that. The mayor and I will be talking again. He can't stay mad at me forever. He still needs 3 votes to do anything. And so he and I will have a conversation. He won't be mad for long. He's a decent man. So we will come to some kind of agreement. I am not ready to say whether or not I will continue to endorse him. He has my endorsement. I haven't taken it back. And I haven't made a decision about whether or not he will continue to have it moving forward in September.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Nigel. All right, the next question is for Everton Bailey.
Commissioner.
Hi, Everton.
Thanks for the opportunity to chat, and thanks for the shout out earlier.
Oh, well, you know, when you're good, you're good.
So I was wondering if you can speak a bit about the ballot measure proposal for the new independent community police review. So I have a two-part question.
Okay.
At this point, do you know if you have the other two votes needed to refer the proposal to the November ballot? And then my second question is if you can address concerns that this proposal may be moving too fast without a more all-encompassing public input process.
Yes. Let me take the last question first. Is it moving too fast after 30 years of community requests for a truly independent police oversight board? I would say no. What I would tell you is that every community meeting or task force or work group that's been asked, what is the number one thing we need to fix in the police bureau? Across the board has been, we need a truly independent police oversight board with subpoena power, with the ability to compel testimony, with a budget so that they can investigate misconduct complaints. And that is exactly what I'm moving to the ballot. What I'm moving is the framework to the charter, and we will have 18 months to put the full oversight board in place. This is absolutely not rushed. I mean, 30 years is a long time to be asking for the exact same reform. The difference, Everton, is now there are tens of thousands of Portlanders who want the exact same thing. And the big difference is, I'm sure the auditor, you know, we've been tinkering around the edges of IPR for its 14 years of life. And it was built under a flawed assumption. And the assumption is that police are the only people who can investigate misconduct of police. I do not buy that premise. It is my belief that when you are a public servant and you work for the community that you serve should have the right to hold you accountable for inappropriate behavior. And so that's what this system will do. And I'm not surprised that the auditor doesn't like it. I'm not surprised that the police doesn't like it. But guess what? Not doing this for the auditor, not doing it for the police. I'm doing it for the community.
Thank you. And just the second part of that question, if you at this point have enough votes to refer the proposal to the ballot next week.
Let me say that all of my colleagues have been excited about the potential for this ballot measure. I never know how they're going to vote because sometimes they'll say they're going to vote one way and they vote somewhere else. So I never know how they're going to vote. But let's just say that this proposal has been warmly received in every office at City Hall.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Thanks, Everton. Next question from Gillian.
Yes. Hi, Commissioner. Thanks
Hi,
for taking
Gillian.
Hey. So you come under pretty sharp criticism for your comments yesterday about the police setting the fires downtown, and Mayor Wheeler says that he has declined to turn the PBB over to you at this moment. So my question for you is actually about Wheeler. Do you think he's equipped to navigate this moment in Portland's history, and is he progressive enough for today's Portland?
Well, both of those are very good questions. What I would say is, as we look around the country, what we've noticed is that many cities have shifted to African American police officers, African Americans in charge of their police force, because of this moment in time that we're in. That was not my thought when I asked for the police bureau. It was just that I was angry that people I loved and cared about could have been injured or killed unnecessarily at the hands of people who are supposed to protect and serve. What I think is that sometimes the mayor takes advice from people that are not police, but unfortunately, I think he takes a lot of advice from either Robert King, as you know, who's a former police and former union president, or from the briefings he gets every day from Portland Police. He is who he is. He is a privileged white man who grew up among wealth and privilege. And so I don't know if he has what we need at this time. I can tell you that I have what we need to fundamentally change how policing happens in Portland, and would be fearless about changing it. So I'll just leave it there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gillian. All right, next question. We've got Rebecca Ellis.
Hi, Commissioner.
Rebecca.
I'm from OPB. I have a question about one of the comments you made yesterday in council. You said you believe the mayor welcomed the involvement of federal officers, and you'd heard him saying as much. I'm wondering what conversation or what moment you were referring to there.
Well, I was referring to, if you remember, the very first press conference he had after the feds showed up. He said he didn't mind the feds as long as they played by the same rules that Portland was required to play by. And it was pointed out that he was the only elected official that didn't have a problem with the feds being here. So I was a bit taken aback to hear him say that. And that is what I referred to yesterday.
So you believe he's changed his stance toward...
Well, he has changed his stance because now he wants the feds gone. But that was not his initial stance.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Rebecca. Next question from Alex Zielinski.
Hi, Commissioner.
Hi.
Thanks for having us. My question is about a comment you made yesterday, but it doesn't not the fire one. You mentioned a conversation with Chief Lavelle where it appeared he didn't understand the media's First Amendment right to document police officers during a protest.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about that, and if that conversation has evolved, and do you feel confident that the police officers understand?
Well, because of the actions that the city council took yesterday, it really doesn't matter whether they understand or not. They've been directed to not target journalists during protests, period. But I was a bit taken aback when I'm talking to a police chief that didn't fundamentally understand First Amendment rights. He did say, I was like, and I pushed him. I said, did you get a legal opinion from an attorney at City Hall? And then he went, no, that's just the law. That's just the law. When the police say move, that means everybody. I said, no. And then I had to ask him about 3 times. Did you get a written opinion from an attorney that works for the city? He had to finally say no, he did not. And I recommended strongly that he go and get one. And it just so happened to be the same day that the federal courts were making a decision on the same topic. And so the federal judge made the point mute, but we also reaffirmed it with our resolution yesterday at the city council.
Great. Thanks, Alex. All right, so let's see. Kelly, did you already ask your first question? I'm trying to keep track because I see you on here.
I did already ask a first question, so we're on second round.
Okay, great. We're going to keep going down the list for the first. We've got a few more people who have questions who haven't asked yet. So I'll come back to you. Jacquelyn.
This is Jacquelyn with COIN. My question to you is, what is your message to protesters who have continued to gather outside the federal courthouse and Justice Center? Federal officers are continuing to use tear gas from what we've seen. What is your message to them as they continue to gather night after night?
Well, I think my message to them is I am with them. We have a right to protest that is built into our Constitution. I can't be with them every night, but I'm going to be there at least once a week because it is important that we show not just these federal squad that has been sent by 45, but that we show the world that Portland is not going to be intimidated into silence. We're not going to allow an invasion to silence us and have us not exercise our constitutional rights.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Jacqueline. All right, now we've got Miriam Gottfried.
That was good. That's not right. I'm going to stop recording on my end so I can send this to you. Can I send this to you? Okay. Yeah.
Sounds like they're talking to somebody else and not us, Lucky.
I thought this is Miriam Gottfried. I thought someone was really excited about me asking a question, but actually Everton already asked my question, so I will cede the floor. I wanted to know about the resolution that you're putting to the council next week, so you already answered that.
Excellent.
Great. All right, next question. Thomas Fuller.
Hi, Commissioner. Thanks so much. Thomas Fuller, Times. I wanted to ask you if you had seen and if you had a reaction to an op-ed in the Washington Post today by the Portland branch president of the NAACP, Edie Mondonay. The headline is, Portland's protests were supposed to be about Black lives. Now they're white spectacle. And he talks about Naked Athena, and also are they really furthering the cause of justice, or is this another example of white co-optation, and saying it's distracting attention. The protests are distracting attention from what should be our central concern, the Black Lives Matter movement.
I love Reverend Mondonay, but I would respectfully disagree with him. I mean, we are still in a Black Lives Matters moment. Black Lives Matter protesting is important. But what 45 did is a shot to anyone who believes in democracy and fairness and justice in our community. When you send in contractors who act like missionaries to attack people primarily just for standing up for their rights and advocating for changes in their government, that should chill every single American that someone in the highest office in this land would use a military approach to try to stomp people's voice out. So for me, there are two movements that are happening simultaneously. The Black Lives Matters movement happened prior to, and let me say it didn't start with George Floyd's death. It's been going on for quite some time, but now there's a lot of new aware folks who have joined into the battle for Black lives. But we cannot afford not to respond to this attack on our democracy, this attack on our Constitution. And we would be foolish to believe that we could stay focused just on Black lives and not address the physical assaults that are taking place on our community members every single night. I mean, we're still in the pandemic, and we are tear gassing people with military grade tear gas every night. And not because, now, the feds have taken up Portland Police's mantra, which is apparently if you touch a fence, that gives you the right to gas hundreds of people. I don't think the response is appropriate to the activity they claim caused them to start gassing people. And I know that they don't need any reason to gas people. They just come out, start throwing tear gas canisters, and then they go back into the Justice Center. We need both, and one is not any more important than the other, but you can't not act when you see an armed force that's being used against community members who are only exercising their free speech right. There's something fundamentally wrong with that, and if we ignore that to focus on Black lives, we would be under martial law all across this country relatively soon. So we have to fight back. We have no choice. And we have to fight back for both.
Thank
you. All right. Thanks, Thomas. We've got a question. Looks like we've got a question from Maxine Bernstein.
Thank you, Commissioner. I dialed in a little late, so forgive me if you've already focused on this, but I caught that you believe the entire culture of the Police Bureau is fundamentally unmanageable and must change. Now, if you were Police Commissioner, what would you change immediately? And I also caught some of your statements about Chief Lavelle, and I wondered whether you support him or not.
I'll start with, when he was promoted to chief, I called him immediately, told him he had my 100% support, and I would do what I could to support him. And then he said, does that mean money? I said, no, I am still going to cut your budget, and that's a given. That's going to happen. So I do support him, but the more I talk to him, I learned just how deeply embedded in the culture of Portland Police Bureau this very, very narrow mindset. And so I think it's something about having the title chief. Once you put that chief hat on, all of a sudden you can't look left or right. There's no gray. Everything is black and white. And what police say is right, and what anybody else says is wrong. And so the more time I've spent with him since he's been chief, the less I find common ground with him. I'm going to keep trying to find common ground, but what I realize is that there's something embedded in the culture that absolutely refuses to contemplate police ever doing anything wrong. Great example, my very first conversation with him, when he was trying to get me to be one of the people that would do a public statement against protesters who may or may not be causing damage downtown. I said to him, I will do that if you can admit that the police may have overreacted at some point over the last 30 days. He could not get there. He could not find a situation where he felt police had ever overreacted. And I find that troubling, because if you can't, I can admit when I'm wrong, and if a police officer is never wrong, then how do we really hold them accountable for their behavior? And that's the culture that we've built. I mean, and as you know, when somebody dies at the hands of a police officer, and 3 weeks later, they are found to have done nothing wrong and they're back on the force and everything is fine. That is not okay. It has to take an emotional toll on anyone who kills someone, whether or not it was justified or not. And we don't mandate that police officers go through a counseling before they go back on the street. If I was in charge of police, I would do that. I would mandate that. Because you can't carry that inside and not be impacted by it.
Is there anything else, can I just follow up, that you would immediately change to affect the culture? You know the Bureau is having problems filling vacancies right now and attracting officers, and it's likely a difficult time.
I'm sorry, you did miss most of what I said. So if I had the police bureau, if the mayor gave it to me tomorrow, my first order would be to demand that Portland police no longer show up at protests. That rather than show up at protests in riot gear, that they should just respond to 911 calls where a crime is being committed, period, without riot gear. 2, I would make sure that that we are engaging police as well as community members and reimagining what community safety looks like. We have allowed the police to control the narrative for way, way, way too long. And the police are accustomed to telling us who the criminals are, who's committing crime, and how much money they need to solve it. There's a reason why it's really hard for Portland police to recruit new recruits. It's because nobody actually wants to work for Portland Police. They do not have a good reputation in the state for being a place where policing happens in a way that other people would want to be involved in. I would start immediately recruiting new officers from high schools, supporting them as they went through community college, creating internship programs. I would totally redesign the training program so that no training happens other than munitions training that isn't partnered with a community member. The reason why we have police officers who think they are us versus them is because that's the way we train them. And we have to retrain them so that they will be more community focused. Community safety means that all of us feel safe. And most communities of color do not feel safe with more police, with more weapons, with more mandates. Other things that I would do is that I would make sure that we set a clear standard on what the expectations were of community police officers. And the expectation is not what they do today. What I know is that police have tried to be all things to all people. They want to be social workers, they want to be housing experts, they want to be alcohol and drug treatment counselors, and their job is to solve crime. And if we get police back to the job of solving crime and getting other community resources to address the other issues, then we will need a lot less police officers and we will have a more focused police department.
Thanks, Maxine. So we are 2 minutes past time. If folks have second questions, feel free to email them to our media account and we'll get this answered for you. I just wanted to give Commissioner the space if you want to close out for us. And, if you have any questions, feel free to contact us.
Yes, I just want to say again, thank you so much for what you do every day, because it's because of you that we have much more information about what's really happening within the Portland Police Bureau and with the federal occupying force. And I want to thank you for being a part of this conversation today. I know all of you are very, very, very busy, and so as am I. And it's fabulous that we could all come together and get some questions answered. I am always accessible. My calendar just fills up very quickly. And so Lockie has the hard task of trying to squeeze in media interviews. Let me close by saying, when I decided to run for office, you may remember it was the last police contract that compelled me to run for public office. And I ran because I wanted to make sure that never again would a police bureau contract be negotiated in private, huge giveaways put in a contract, and then stuck on an emergency track for passage the same day. I made a commitment when I saw that happen that would never happen again, not on my watch. And now that I'm a city commissioner, I'm definitely keeping that word and making sure that what we do, as much as possible, is in the public eye. I hope you will just forgive me for the stupid words that I said yesterday and put that in context against my 30 years of work to make this community better. We have a lot of work to do coming out of this pandemic. We have a lot of work to do once we get these federal folks out of here. And I am committed to reforming Portland Police, whether or not it is in my portfolio. So I thank you all. Hopefully you'll have a weekend, and hopefully the weekend will be quieter than it has been. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.